Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bound by Grace podcast. This is Amber Hunt. In this compassionate and insightful episode, I will be welcoming Kayla Moulder, a gifted pre-licensed therapist with experience in individual counseling, couples work, and psychiatric care, to explore the often unspoken impact of trauma within marriage. Together, we will impact how past wounds can shape emotional reactions, relational patterns, and our sense of safety with the ones we love most. Kayla brings both clinical depth and human warmth as she guides listeners through common trauma responses in relationships, helping us understand why we shut down, lash out, or withdraw when we're triggered. From identifying the roots of reactive behavior to offering gentle, practical steps toward healing and connection, this episode is a must listen for anyone seeking growth, grace, and emotional resilience in their marriage. Whether you're navigating conflict, craving deeper intimacy, or simply trying to make sense of your own emotional responses, this dialogue offers hope, clarity, and a way forward. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. And how are you?
Good. Thank you for being on. So, you disclosed to me this is your first podcast. Are you nervous?
A little bit, but
A
we'll get
little
through
bit. Yeah. It just try not to think that we're recording. Just act like you're having a session with me and you're disclosing, just educating me. So you'll get comfortable. I promise. I'm pretty good at making people comfortable. So I think this is going to be an excellent episode. I've done some trauma ones before, but nothing that's really pinpointed, what can we do when we're triggered? Like really focus based on those responses, what they look like, maybe where they come from, and then how can we grow and learn so we can get maybe healed a little bit and not respond that way. So what I really want to focus on in this episode, if you are in agreement, is focus on the person with the trauma response, but also if we can educate the person dealing with someone with those trauma responses, so they can help them along in that part of their life.
Right.
Because we always, like I said, in my previous episodes, we talked about trauma, but we really focus on the person having it. I think it's important that we educate those that are dealing with someone with it. So that way, in a loving way, they can help them through it.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree.
So you gave me some talking points. Just FYI for our viewers, this is not really based on a Q&A. I didn't come up with questions, so it really is conversational format. But she did come up with some talking points to help us along. So we'll try and focus in those, but I really want to go where the Spirit leads us. If we feel like there's something that needs to be said that's off this particular topic, that's totally fine. I just want it to flow as natural as possible and get that education out there for our viewers. So I think the first thing that we came up with was communication, right? So communication issues stemming from previous childhood or adult trauma. So do you want to dive into that?
So with trauma responses, this is probably one of the main things that hits a roadblock in marriages and in any relationship, honestly, even platonic friendships. Essentially, it's either childhood trauma that can kind of show up in our current relationships. So that could look like something, maybe when you were younger, a parent or something was yelling at you specifically for something, and not really able to regulate their emotions. And an example of that would be, oh, well, you're being too much right now. And so for the person that receives that comment, they're like, oh, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be myself, or maybe I need to tone it down. And so when they enter those relationships, it's more of like, oh, well, I can't be too much, or they're going to yell at me, or they're going to leave.
Yeah.
So that's one example. Another one would maybe just be past relationships that someone has had, is whether that be a toxic relationship, where they were maybe belittled or not treated properly or not even really able to express themselves. Those type of things can show up in our current relationships, especially in marriage, when we're getting to know each other and we're trying to like work out any kind of argument that comes up. It's almost like the person with the trauma response shuts down, right? Or goes the 180 and then lashes out and starts getting angry and irritable. And our partners usually are like, wait a minute, where did this come from? And so it then creates this weird back and forth of trying to.
Okay. So you're saying that trauma responses can go either way. It can be where you feel like you can't be yourself, or you respond in a very defensive, over the top manner.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about when it comes to parents yelling? So that way parents watching can kind of watch out for these things. What do you think kind of causes trauma in that aspect? Is it just the yelling? Is it a certain way of yelling or time they're yelling? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. So there are different circumstances. And I'm not saying that you can't have an argument in front of your kids. It's going to happen. And in all
Yeah.
honesty, it's more healthy to have a mutual disagreement in front of your kids so they can
As
see
long
how.
as long as there's resolution at the
Right.
end. Yeah, they got to see that. Yeah.
Yes, where it has more of a healthy process through that. So some parents that I've known, they don't ever fight in front of their kids, like never. And that's not exactly healthy either, because then how are your children supposed to see a healthy conversation, even when we are in disagreement with each other, right? Everyone's going to fight a little bit. We're going to have arguments. So kind of being cognizant of that in front of our kids is important. But you also don't want to have over the top screaming matches in front of them either. You know, it's kind of like, okay, should we have this conversation in front of our kids? Okay, I think we can reach a resolution pretty quickly, right? And we can talk it out, show those great communication skills and say, hey, yeah, mom and dad had a disagreement, but we worked it out, and that's fine, right? So it just depends. You don't really want to go one way or the other. You know, you kind of want to make sure that you're keeping that healthy communication open to show your kids, hey, it's possible to have a disagreement and work it out.
So we talked about having healthy arguments in front of the kids. And I think that that is definitely something that people don't think about, because they think, I'm going to save my kids from these arguments and I'm going to do them in private. And as healthy as that seems, you're making it where you don't allow your child to learn, because you can tell them all day long, but it's psychologically proven that the way children actually learn is from actions that they see. So it is so important to have those healthy arguments. And obviously, you don't want to have every argument in front of them. You don't want to disclose everything to them.
Right.
But simple arguments that are okay for them to hear, that's a good thing, because then they get to see you butting heads a little bit, but they need to see where you go with it to see a resolution.
Right.
So very important. I completely agree with that. My parents never argued in front of me. And I know that they had the best intentions, but it did make it in my life where it took me a very long time to have healthy conversations, healthy arguments. So having healthy, arguments in front of the kids, very, very good to have. What about, let's talk about yelling at the kids, right? If I'm not mistaken, I saw a study where yelling at the kids, even if it is your intention is to just get on to them, that raised in volume and voice is actually creating a trauma response where their brain is forming different pathways from trauma.
Yes. So yeah, completely correct. It's when we kind of hear that heightened response to us, we're like, oh, wait, something I did was wrong. And then, yeah, you create that pathway. And that can have, issues in self esteem, like I said earlier. If, like, you're being told you're too much, or, hey, you're doing this wrong all the time. Those are negative things that you're hearing as a child. And your brain is still growing and still creating those pathways. So trying to then go back and fix that later in like adulthood is really hard, because you're like, well, I've been told it for so long. And when you're being yelled at, like, no one likes that. It's just something that no one ever wants to really happen to them. So it's a difference when someone yells, like, in general, like, oh, hey, watch out for that, or yelling at the child. That's completely different things. So you always want to kind of not yell at the child, because it also shows maybe some issues with, like, regulating your emotions, right? And then growing up, the kid's gonna be like, oh, well, this is the only way I know how to respond to stress or anxiety or being overwhelmed, is like, oh, well, I was yelled at. That's the only thing I know, so I'm gonna do it too.
Yeah. So I have 5 kids. My mother, my biological mother, was a screamer.
Yes.
I'm talking about, I got to a point where I couldn't even stand hearing her voice. I hated it. It made my anxiety go up so high, and I only had to deal with it until I was 10 years old. Then I moved in with her when I think I was 16 for only 6 months, because we butted heads and it didn't work out. Then I moved in with her again at 18. Again, very short period. It did not work out, but she was a screamer. Anything and everything that pissed her off, she would yell. She would yell at the kids. She would yell just because. Then she would yell at her husband. And it was exhausting for everyone living with her. And so for me, I caught myself yelling at my kids, and I was like, this is not the parent that I want to be. So now I am super freaking mindful when I start to feel overwhelmed and wanting to yell. The only time, I will say I'm not perfect, but the only time I raise my voice with my kids is when I have autism, so I get very overstimulated with a lot of noise. I have 5 children. So there is a lot of noise. So I'll say, hey, calm down, and I'll try that. Okay. But if they're all kind of in their thing and they're not listening, I will raise my voice instantly. I'll go, hey. And then they all respond, and I'll look at them and I'll be like, calm down. Mommy's had enough. I need you to calm down.
Right.
But when I'm getting on to them, I do not raise my voice.
Right.
I have a lot of bass in my voice that I can get. Not a lot of people have that, but I can lower my voice and get a little louder, but not yelling. And it just makes them know, you've reached my point. I'm being very serious.
Right.
And I talk slower to them. So what do you think about that, like, way of I guess dealing with your kids? Does that have a trauma response?
Not necessarily, because you're not saying, like, degrading things or anything. You're essentially like, hey,
I'm not.
I need your attention for a second. And then you go in with, okay, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. This is what I need you to do. Right. And in all honesty, kids respond really well to that. They're like, oh, okay, attention. Cool. Let's go to the next thing. Okay, this is the information I need. And then go from there. And the issue that people usually run into is they just start yelling, and then they continue yelling, and then they get more heightened, and, like, physical energy too is like, and then they get more heightened, and then they start saying things they don't mean. Gotcha. And then it's like, oh, okay, you're being too much this, you're doing this thing, and I don't like it. And then the child then takes it in, like, oh, they don't like this about me.
Oh,
Or,
gotcha.
hey, I'm, playing and I'm being loud and having fun, oh, mom and dad don't like that, right?
Oh,
When,
gotcha.
honesty, that's not what they mean to say. It's just more they're in that heightened state, so they're not thinking rationally. They're thinking, how do I get out of being overstimulated? Oh, I'm going to yell louder than the noise, right? And then they go in and they're like, okay. And then, of course, mom guilt, dad guilt comes in afterwards, usually, because they're like, oh, I yelled at my kids. And that happens. It does. So usually the best course of action for that is then go back and apologize and be like, hey,
Yes.
I got really overwhelmed there. I'm sorry. This is what was happening because of, your actions and my actions. I do apologize for raising my voice. I will try to be better next time,
Yes. I'm very big. My parents never apologized. Never.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm so very big on, I kind of put them on a pedestal because I thought they did no wrong. So their word was the way, the truth, the gospel, everything. And so when I became an adult and I found out things about them, not that they're bad people, but just
Right.
things that are human nature,
Mm-hmm.
it was a huge letdown and like almost like it took me from reality. Like it was a very hard thing to cope with and understand. I'm past that now. And now I'm very gracious with my parents and they're very real with me as an adult. But my kids, I'm so, uh, again, mindful of if I go over the top or I think that I said something or treated them in some sort of way that was disrespectful to them, I go back and I apologize when things have calmed down. I don't
Yeah.
do it in the midst of it because I
Yes.
need them to understand they're being, taking, they need to go to their room. They need to take their punishment. But after things have calmed down, I go to them. I had an actual issue with one of my daughters and it got out of hand because she got out of hand
Yes.
and she's 13. So that out of hand is way different than a 7-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would not listen, would
Right.
not calm down, started slamming doors, throwing things like it was out of character. I knew something was going on, but I wanted her to listen. So I'd get very angry because she wasn't listening when she usually does. So I go into a room after everything calmed down and I climbed in bed with her and held her because that's kind of what she needs. Every kid's different.
Yes.
And I looked at her and I was like, Mommy is so sorry. This is what I did or what I said in this aspect was very wrong. It was disrespectful to you, and you never should be treated that way by anyone. So I think it's important when you apologize, reaffirm to your child how they should be treated.
Right. Yeah.
That way, if someone ever comes to them and says, I'm sorry, they're not thinking, okay, everything's good now. They need to know then in the future, this is how I should be treated. And if that person continues to do these things and just say sorry, that's not healthy. They need to make a change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And I think your process of it is something that most parents should kind of strive for, right? You're each going to have your own way of doing it, right? You go back, you apologize. Some kids like an explanation. Some kids need, like you said, you snuggle with your daughter, like, some hugs and affection, right? And it's just making sure that they know, hey, it's calmed down now. We can work through this. You
Yeah.
want to essentially be that safe space, and like you said, we're all humans. We're gonna hit those high points where we just lash out and it happens. It's just how do we react to that afterwards? And I mean, you used a great example of distancing yourself physically. I think that's a great thing. That's something I say with a lot of my couples in counseling is, hey, if you're in an argument and you're yelling, screaming, doing really unhealthy things, separate, like physically separate, go to one room and go to the other one, breathe it out and sit for just a little bit until you literally feel your physical body calm down.
Yes. Yeah. You need to feel that actual relaxation of,
Yeah.
okay, I'm
Mhm.
back to my baseline. Like,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. And then you have the more
Um,
rational, okay, let's go. We can go back and talk about this now.
yes. And I do have to put out there, I did not want to hug my child. I know
Mm-hmm.
that sounds bad, but
Mm-hmm.
I felt disrespected too. And it was almost like, if I hug her, am I giving her something good in response to something bad? But I had to come to terms with, no, my child, this particular child, I have 5, none of them are the same. This
Mm-hmm.
particular child, when we get into arguments and fights, her mind goes to, I'm such a bad child. I'm awful. My parents don't love me. She has high anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that from her. And I know that hugs, we can get her out of her bad mood just by hugging her. And
Yeah.
then she starts to do what we ask. So I was like, okay, I don't feel like hugging her, but I do know that's what she needs to feel secure.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you have to step out of your comfort zone sometimes, and in whatever you're wanting to feel good about yourself, and do something different that your child needs,
Mm-hmm.
because you're doing it for the benefit of their growth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my opinion on it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
every child's different. None of my other 4 I have to hug. Like, I still hug them, but
Right.
like I said, I'm autistic, so I'm not the biggest touchy feely person. So even hugging I have to make myself do it. I enjoy it after I do it, but it's not my first
Yeah.
go-to.
Getting yourself
Yeah.
out to do it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which, you know, makes sense
Um,
having that. It's good that you know, like, hey, what they each need.
yes, I'm not perfect by any means, but that's something I really try, because in my household, my parents did everyone the same for the most part,
Mm.
because they thought that was the right way. And all of us responded differently and took it differently.
Yeah.
So I think tailoring it to each child is very important. Knowing your child's love languages, I think, is really important.
Yes.
Um, and I know that we're going to go into attachment styles. It
Mm-hmm.
might also be important to know your child's attachment style too.
Yes. Yes. Or, you know, your partners too, right?
Your
Um,
partners too.
we all respond in a certain way, and we all kind of, and of course, mental health can kind of mess with those a little bit. Like if you're an anxious person, you might have more of an anxious kind of attachment style. So to kind of go over like the main ones. So you have like the secure attachment. That is where you feel very comfortable in your relationships, platonic, you know, parent and child relationship, or your romantic in your marriage and everything like that. You feel very comfortable, you know, to include intimacy, independence, you know, trusting your partners, trusting your relationships. That's very like positive and encouraging view of themselves and view of their partner, or you know, their kids and everything like that. This usually represents like long-term healthy relationships. They're able to communicate really well. They're able to offer support, and those kind of things. They don't really feel anxious or mistrust in those kind of attachments. And essentially, it's where we all want to be, right? With our
I was about
relationship.
to say, so that's the goal.
Yes.
Yeah.
You kind of want to work up to that one. And once you have it, you're like, oh, this is nice. I like this. And then the other one would be an anxious attachment style. So this is worrying about relationships, worrying about themselves in the relationship as well. So this can have a little bit more like self-esteem issues, mistrust, fear of abandonment. They also are sensitive to the person that is communicating with them. They're very sensitive to their moods, can be kind of more people pleasing. The one thing that I like to mention with that, it's kind of you know, like the fear responses, right? What is it called? Flight, fight, um, and I'm blanking on the last one right now.
Fight, flight, and freeze.
And freeze. And then there's also fawn. So fawning is the people pleasing. So you're like,
Oh,
oh no, I'm gonna go along with what you say so that you can like accept me and like me.
oh, wow. Okay.
So we have there's actually like 4 instead of the 3. And so that's more like, okay, yes, I'm going to do what you say so that you won't get mad at me or you won't leave me. So the anxious attachment styles are wanting to be close and like constantly validated that you're going to stay, whether that's a parent or a partner or a friendship, right? Like, hey, don't leave me. I'm anxious and I'm going to attach to you. And then the third one is avoidant. That one is avoiding emotional feelings, closeness, kind of being more shut off and shut down.
Mhm.
They are more independent and they have a lot of hard times with regulating their emotions. So that could be simply they shut down and they just don't have any more conversations when they're kind of triggered, or they can go the 180 and lash out and just push people away with like anger. Um, that one is more, they almost seem like they're stonewalling you, if that makes sense. They're like, no, I don't want to deal with that. Don't want to deal with confrontation. I'm going to avoid it. Um, and then lastly is disorganized, which is a mix of the anxious and avoidant together. So some situations they're avoiding it. Some situations they're like, no, I'm going to cling on. Please don't leave me. So type of thing.
Okay, so secure is the one that we want to strive for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say my husband is the anxious one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the avoidant one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, as much as I'd like to say I'm secure, I'm definitely not always secure. I
Right.
have my avoidant tendencies depending on the situation and how I'm feeling that day or about the whatever we're going through.
Right.
Um, and so I'm like a light switch. I can be very loving and very tender. And then once we get to a point where I feel, and this is a trauma response from my past relationship, he was a narcissist. So
Mm-hmm.
he would play me and play on my emotions and make me feel like he would literally like cry. And you could
Mm-hmm.
tell it was a put on cry. So
Yes.
I got to the point where I would just shut down. I would be like, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of me having a response to this because I
Right.
know that it's not genuine. So now I have become an avoidant, and it's to a detriment of my husband because when we first started, we would get into an argument. I'm not leaving, I'm just shutting down because I've had enough and I need time to calm down.
Right.
So I will just walk away. He will follow me
Mm-hmm.
and want to talk about it. Like, please talk to me. Like, don't do this to me. Like, or if we're on the phone and he's at work, I would cut him off. And then all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden I'm receiving phone call after phone call after phone call. So I got to the point where I realized once we took a marriage counseling session that he was anxious type.
Yes.
So now when I'm in that mood of needing to shut down, just needing space to gather my thoughts and to realize that what I'm going to say next and do it with care. I need that time and space. He's not going to want to give me that time and space. So now I say to him, I'm not leaving. We're okay. This
Mm-hmm.
isn't too big. I just need a little time and then we'll come back to it. And that calms his ass down so fast. Like he's like, okay. So it's not your first response. It's not what you want to do, but it's what he needs.
Right.
So for somebody in an anxious attachment style, I'm going to go 2 routes. We're going to go each attachment style. We're going to avoid secure because that's where we want to be.
Right.
But I'd like to find out information about what the person in that attachment style can do to start to get to a secure attachment style and what the person dealing with that attachment style can do to help their spouse.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, we can start with the anxious. And it's interesting that you kind of already said that, you know, your husband's anxious and you're avoidant. Because a lot of relationships, that's usually what it is. It's an avoidant person and an anxious person. And yeah, it's interesting how they kind of cooperate because, yeah, your avoidant behavior wants to go and like, I need space for a second. And your anxious person sees, oh, wait a minute, they're leaving. Like, don't leave me. We need to figure this out right now.
Yeah.
I'm more anxious because I like to get things resolved like right away. And I'm like, no, if we don't resolve this, it's just going to spiral and then it's just a mess. So, with the anxious attachment style, it's kind of untwisting your thinking because where it comes from is your own thoughts of like, oh, well, if I mess up and then, oh, they're leaving now, it reinforces that thought pattern of, oh, I did something wrong, or they're going to leave me because I'm not good enough, essentially. So it's kind of like untwisting that thinking of, hey, they love me, we're going to be okay, and they just need a little bit of space. And sometimes it does take some initiative from the partner. It's, hey, I'm just going to step away for 5 minutes. I just need 5 minutes to think it through and calm down, but I will be back. And it's almost like a practice of letting yourself sit in that because it's going to feel uncomfortable for a little bit for the
Mm-hmm.
anxious person because they're going to be like, ooh, well, what if? You know, they're going to start spiraling, overthinking, and all that kind of stuff. But being like, hey, let's look at the evidence. We've had arguments before and they've come back every time.
Mm-hmm.
So, what am I afraid of here? What is coming up? And maybe sitting with like some self-reflection and seeing what specific triggers they may have. Um, and it could be a previous relationship where they did end up leaving. Or, you know, they've been told, hey, you're too much, or you're doing too much, and I can't handle you, or something like that, right? And it's just looking at the evidence. That's the number one thing that I usually talk with people with anxiety is, yeah, look at the facts, right? Our brain is not a good source of information. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is we go against ourselves all the time. You know, we have our intrusive thoughts and our thoughts that come in and we're like, wait a minute, that's not, I don't actually believe that. You know, and I mean, even in a religious standpoint too, like we have thoughts come in here saying, oh, you're not good enough or this or that. And then we start to
Yes.
believe these things. And
Mm-hmm.
then we're like, wait a minute, but my mind thinks it means it has to be true, and that's
Right.
not the case, you know.
Right.
um, so just kind of sitting there like, where is this thought coming from? Why am I having it? Does it stem from a previous experience? And then once they kind of work through that, and then again look at the evidence, she comes back every time. You know what, I think I'll be okay. And it's like a mini form of exposure therapy, just kind of sitting with it and like trusting your partner, you know, which is what you want to be able to do in a secure relationship, is trust them.
Mm-hmm.
So allowing yourself to trust them and not trust your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, so with the avoidant, I think that you've kind of already done a little bit of that. Is, hey, I know my partner needs this really quick. I'm going to tell them I'll be back. I just need a few moments. And I don't think it's a bad thing to step away from an argument because it does keep those emotions more regulated. And then you're able to talk more calmly in that rational mind. It's just maybe see if you can, hey, let me talk with them a little bit to see what I can help them with right now instead of immediately wanting to go. Um, and just looking at, why are you wanting to shut down? Again, any connections from previous relationships, and sit there and be like, well, why am I wanting to run away right now? Why am I wanting to do this? And if it's an argument about like money or something, be like, okay, what's going on? Why is this triggering for me? Oh, okay, maybe it's just this is my normal way to deal with things. And I'm actually not really anxious about the conversation. I just don't like having arguments.
Mm.
Then you can be like, okay, I'm gonna make myself do this and see how it feels. And again, practice makes perfect. So I think the techniques in each one are okay. It's just we don't want to sit in those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. What about the other partner dealing with an avoidant? how could they help their partner?
I think allowing them to like go into another space if they need to, if they feel like, if they can kind of see those what is it called, signs that, hey, this might be really bothering them, if it's like a topic that they're just really uncomfortable with. And again, this comes with knowing your partner really well and trusting them essentially. So if they notice signs are like, okay, this conversation seems to be really getting to them, I'm gonna maybe even suggest, hey, why don't you go take a 5? Like, we'll come back to this in a little bit, you know.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
or there's also, I've had some couples that I counsel, I've had them write letters to each other, because sometimes doing the face to face arguing or disagreement or discussions is a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm like, separate, write everything down, and then trade the letters, and then go in separate rooms and read them, and then come back and be like, oh, I see your point of view now. You know,
Hmm.
so there's different ways to get around arguments and disagreements and trauma responses than just going face to face. You know, you can do writing, you can do I've had some couples where they go and I tell them to go take a walk together. Right, you're outside, you're, you know, in nature and everything like that, and you're able to kind of walk and talk, and
Yeah.
sometimes it reduces the tension.
Yeah. I could see that. That's really good. Um, where can someone find out what their attachment style is? I know there's some free things out there.
Yes. I'm not certain on the like exact websites or anything like that, but yeah, if you just Google search like attachment styles, usually they'll come with a bunch of little websites that like, hey, this is, you know, take a quiz to find your attachment style. Almost like the love languages. There's tests for those too. And yeah, you just answer, I think it's around like 20 to 30 questions. And then you kind of go through and then I'll tell you which attachment style. And one thing to pinpoint on that is sometimes our attachment styles can change.
Yes.
So, you know, with if you know, go into a relationship and you're anxious and then you become avoidant, it's also something to look at, because then you're like, well, what made you become an avoidant attachment style? So, looking at those connections too, I think is really important, because then you can kind of pinpoint, hey, maybe this relationship isn't good for me if they're causing me to
Yeah.
become avoidant, you know?
Yes. Yes. Um, so knowing your attachment style, knowing your spouse's attachment style is pretty important to be able
Mm-hmm.
to navigate your healthiest conversations together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some common trauma responses, to know, like, oh, this is a trauma response. I need to evaluate where that comes from. Like, how do you know when you're having that response?
So again, the most common one is outbursts or like an emotional regulation problem. So,
Okay.
you know, the regulation of our emotions and how we learn this is usually from our childhood or previous relationships. And trauma also creates those walls between our marriage and blocks the open communication that we seek in marriage, or any relationship, honestly. And usually it stems from a perceived lack of safety or just being unable to express your emotions. So a lot of the times that are the most common thing is like, okay, men aren't supposed to cry. It's a stigma, right? And,
Yes.
you know, we're like, wait a minute, why can't men cry? They have emotions too, right? It's almost like, okay, well, God gave us emotions and we're allowed to have emotions. It's just we don't need to be stuck in them, essentially.
Hmm.
We're allowed to express them, we're allowed to be in them and find out what's causing them. It's just then we can't use them as ammunition, essentially. Being like, oh, I'm going to yell at you because I'm angry, or, you know, have that response to someone. So let's see. An example would be, um, again, kind of with the parent. You know, someone's yelling at or the parent's yelling at the kid, and then the kid's like, okay, well, now I'm going to yell at my little brother or sister because I'm angry and annoyed at them because my mom and dad are yelling at me. So it just goes down the line. And then where does it end?
Right.
because then it's just going to keep going every generation. So allowing your kids, okay, I understand you're upset. Let's find out why you're upset. Okay. I know there's a lot of things going on right now. You're overwhelmed. You're angry that your, brother or sister took your toy. That's not very nice, but also, how can we move on and also accept having those emotions and then dealing with those emotions?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what if I find this a lot in
Mhm.
couples, and I don't think it's healthy. Tell me what you think. Um, when people have a lot of trauma, everyone has trauma,
Mhm.
right? It's just where it came from and how deep it is, and whether you are self-reflecting on it. Um, but when people have trauma, I'm going to go off of women because I have yet to hear a man say this,
Mhm.
that in a marriage or relationship, women have tended to say, that's a trigger for me.
Mhm.
You're triggering me.
Mhm.
And then they're blaming their spouse every time they're triggered and making their spouse not trigger them, instead of, is there a different way they should be reacting to this? Like, instead of saying, no, you're triggering me, and it's really not something that their spouse shouldn't be doing. It's not unhealthy. It just happens to trigger them. So I'm not saying an unhealthy thing.
Mhm.
They're, putting a boundary there, just something that is triggering for their spouse because of previous
Mhm.
experiences.
Mhm.
How should that, how should that be handled, instead of just saying, you're triggering me, let's stop?
Again, yeah, communication. Literally saying, hey, I'm noticing this trigger for me and it comes from this. Even if they don't know it in the moment, maybe being like, I don't know why this is triggering me, but I want to explore that and find out the reasoning for it, because if you kind of think about it, you're going to find that connection. And then presenting it to your partner, being like, hey, this action or whatever they were doing is triggering to me because when I had this happen in a past relationship, it led to this, this, and this. Which could be something as small as, getting into an argument all the way up to, like sexual trauma. It could be anything. Obviously, you won't
Yeah.
know that until they disclose that. But it's very important to kind of be aware of those things in a relationship, being like, okay, these things are their triggers. I'm not saying you have to be an expert, but just noticing, okay, she doesn't like when I like touch her shoulder or something like that because she like flinches away. And you're going to
Yeah.
notice
Yeah.
things, you know?
Yeah. Let's go off of that particular one.
Right.
Should that spouse, does that mean for the rest of their lives, is it really, what's the word? I had the word and then I lost it, but is it realistic
Hmm.
for the rest of their lives your spouse can't touch you on the shoulder?
And that's a
Does that
hard
make
thing.
sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
no, it does. It's a hard thing to be like, yes, it's realistic, or no, it's not realistic, because unless they have completely disclosed everything that happens and causes that trigger, or they are aware themselves, you can't really justify being like, okay, hey, I think that we should work through this, if that makes sense. Because, for example, if it was a sexual trauma, that's a
Okay.
lot of work to go through. And
Yeah.
you don't know exactly where they are on that journey. So it may be, hey, doing more of like an exposure therapy, like, hey, I'm just going to touch you, nothing's coming of it, let me
Yes.
just sit here with you, we're just going to spend 30 seconds, start off,
Yes.
I'm just touching
Yes.
you. And that can help someone, but it just depends on how deeply rooted it is. Some people, that's not going to work. And so maybe
Okay.
it's just having that conversation, being like, I really don't like being touched on the shoulder. Is there another way that we can have that physical touch somewhere else where I feel more comfortable? And then it's just compromise. And then it maybe eventually, hey, they can touch them on the shoulder. It's
Okay.
just kind of working with your partner and noticing the reaction to those triggers and kind of going with them on that journey, because I mean, an ultimate thing is that it's their body, and they're going to be the ones that tell you when they're ready for that kind of physical touch in that specific example.
Well, let's bring up another one, and maybe you can tell me if this is something that is realistic. Another one that a lot of women have, if they've been cheated on before, their spouse looking in the direction of an attractive person doesn't mean they're actually checking them out, but just looking in that direction can be extremely triggering, and it makes an argument out of something that could have been very innocent and nothing.
Right.
I think that going through life with that can be very unfair to the other spouse when they're not the ones that caused that trauma.
Right.
But at the same time, you want to respect your spouse and love your spouse. So you want to not do that. Right. So what can be done in that situation? Because this is a common one. Can the husband do something like, or even the person being traumatized sees an attractive person and says, okay, can you look in that direction for a second? I know you're not checking them out. Just look in that direction. That way I know I can start getting through this. Or him say, I'm going to look behind us. That does not mean I'm checking them out. And I need you to know you're safe and I still love you. Like what can they do in that? That may not be it, but.
Yeah. So a couple things that kind of popped up as you were explaining that. I think why it's so important to also know your partner's love language is, for example, if he's looking in a direction or the woman's looking in a certain direction, right? Saying like validation. Hey, I love you. I am attracted to you and I want to be with you. So that'd be like words of affirmation, right? Or if they're literally in a crowd and they're scanning, maybe if their love language is physical touch, okay, I'm going to grab their hand while I'm doing this, just kind of adding an extra layer of reassurance until they feel more comfortable and that trust is built. Again, it's not necessarily that they're not trusting their partner. It's just, again, a trigger response.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it's like, okay, hey, I actually can trust this person. They've shown me time and time again. Yes, there's an attractive woman over there. Okay. But he's holding my hand. He's then very, quickly looking and then looking back at me and saying, hey, I love you. Hey, you look really good today. Or just kind of those things. Or, acts of service, for example, with like the 5 love languages is, hey, I'm going to bring her flowers, or, hey, I'm going to go do this for her, or let's go on a date or something. And kind of looking at the evidence that you have in your relationship and being like, oh, it was that he was just looking in the crowd. He wasn't looking at another woman, or she wasn't looking at another man, kind of thing. So it's, again, practice makes perfect. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but usually when things feel uncomfortable, people run away from it.
Yes.
And in all honesty, in order to grow, you need to sit in that uncomfortable space. You have to sit there until it becomes your new comfort zone.
I think that is important. You because in order to grow in anything, a new job, going to school like you're doing, it's uncomfortable sometimes because it's the unknown, right? But you still have to push yourself to do that in order to grow as a person. So I think that that's really good advice. So let's get into emotional regulation.
Yeah, so that's something that pops up a lot because when we're in distress, our first response to it is, okay, I'm either going to cry, I'm going to yell, I'm going to scream, I'm going to say hurtful things, or try and shift the blame onto another person. And that can take form in a lot of different ways. And it all comes down to not being taught how to regulate our emotions. And I think that's a big shift from like this generation into the next is, hey, we're allowing our kids to have those like crying fits or anything like that. Not saying a tantrum, but sitting and like, oh, you're upset, you're sad. Okay, you're human. You're allowed to have those things. Mommy and daddy do too. And kind of getting on that level to relate to them and being like, hey, it's okay to have emotions. Just don't let them dictate every action in your life. Kind of looking at it saying, okay, get that crying out, or hey, if you're angry, like, let's stomp it out, let's do something physical to get that energy out of our body, because it sits in our bodies, right?
It does.
Like trauma usually sits like in the hips and like shoulder area. Anger is usually up here and like in our arms and stuff. Sadness is usually in our chest. And so it's like, how do we get that physical out, right? And then it gets rid of all the like the emotions attached to it, in a sense, like, hey, I can deal with this now because I can think clearly. It's not like a cloud over my head now. But in all honesty, a lot of the times we weren't taught that as a kid. We were told to, hey, I need you to be quiet right now, without really an explanation. My parents were pretty good about explaining why something needed to happen, but I know that's not every family. I know some clients that I've worked with, they were told they were too much, or they were just told to sit down and shut up, essentially, in
Yes.
those cases. And like, do as I say, or do as I say, not as I do. And
Yes.
without any explanation. That's really hard for a kid to kind of deal with, because you're like, okay, well, then what am I supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
It brings up more questions rather than answers. And I think showing, when we have those emotions pop up, like for example, with my kids, if I'm crying and my mom or my daughter comes up and it's like, hey, mommy, what's wrong? And I'm like, hey, mommy's just a little sad right now. I need to get some tears out, and then I'll feel a little bit better. And then she's like, okay. And now she knows it's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset, but we can pick ourselves back up and handle the day. Um, and so I think that's a really big shift I've noticed with this generation, is allowing ourselves to feel, instead of bottling it up, which, as we can see, is not great.
Mm-hmm. How can you deal with a spouse that has emotional regulation issues? Is therapy the number one? Is there something their spouse can do to help them in that, if
Yeah,
they're good at regulating their emotion?
yeah, I do think therapy is really good, just because they may not know why they're having emotional regulation or outbursts or anything like that. And so the therapist is kind of there to work with them and say, hey, you know what? You're doing this action anytime this comes up. There's a connection here. Let's figure that out. But I think if the spouse is really good at regulating their emotions, maybe just kind of, helping them work through it the way that they do. So being like, okay, I see you're angry right now. Let's take a break, right? If you go need to go punch a pillow or something like that, go do that, right? Or go on a run, or do something like that and offer suggestions. But I think also it's really healthy if the spouse kind of just sits with them and like supports them to get out of that emotion, if that makes sense. Not necessarily running away or getting angry back, but just acknowledging, hey, I see that you're really upset right now. How can I help you? How can I be there for you? What
Mm-hmm.
support do you need? Right? Um, it's something that I've had to learn in an inpatient psych hospital. It's called like being trauma informed and like responding to people who may have an outburst. So, for example, if there's like a patient that has schizophrenia and he's kind of having some, auditory
Mm-hmm.
delusions and everything like that, and hallucinations, it's, hey, instead of like trying to like calm them down by getting heightened and angry, or any kind of like that, talk to them on a calm level, be like, hey, I notice you're feeling this. How are you really feeling? Am I correct that you're feeling like this? And then sometimes they'll come back, yeah, I'm feeling really angry. Okay, what are you angry about? And then usually they'll tell you, and like, okay, well, what can I do to support you? And sometimes just saying that or posing that question to them shows, hey, someone's listening to me, And actually, I think this would really help me right now. And then both, the spouse and the person in the distress are able to kind of grow together because then they know those patterns and they see those patterns and they're able to provide help.
So we talked about where you hold certain emotions. Um, what about certain things that we can do because emotions are quite overwhelming for certain people, like myself, when I have emotions. When I was a kid, man, I'm telling you, it was so bad that it was like I'd have to crawl out of my skin. Like
Yeah.
I'd have to do something to physically release that
Mm-hmm.
tension.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter is that way. And I don't have the tools in my toolbox really to help her.
Yeah.
So let's talk about anger. So would you say to release anger, it'd be good to do something more physical in that moment?
Yes. So usually whenever people come to me like, oh, I have some anger issues and I just don't really know how to get rid of it. My first suggestion is go on a run, or go to the gym, because you're kind of like able to use your muscles and it just helps to release it. If you can go to a gym or something like that that has like a punching bag, that's a really
Mhm.
good way to release that anger and those emotions. Yeah, running. I mean, if you don't have a gym nearby or it's too hot to run outside, yeah, just taking a pillow and just kind of like hitting it a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think that the top two are like running, working out, playing a sport is another great one,
Mhm.
just to get that physical energy out. I think that's the top emotion that has a lot of like physical stuff attached to it because you're just like, it's overwhelming. It really is.
So let's talk about anxiety. What can we do when we're feeling anxious
Mm-hmm.
to get that emotion back to baseline?
So, if you are kind of wanting to do the more physical thing, sometimes dancing around is really good. Like put on a good song that kind of uplifts you, dance it out, right? Or jump and shake it out cuz like a lot of the times with our physical symptoms of anxiety, we get really shaky and we're like,
Yes.
"Ooh, okay." And or we're getting our sweaty palms, racing heart, so maybe just like dancing it out and like just getting the wiggles out essentially. It's great for kids. If they're feeling very anxious about something, like, all right, let's do it. That is a great one. If you're wanting to go more of the calm route, just kind of sitting and doing some like box breathing is really good. So box breathing is, breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, and then hold it for 4. So that way, again, your body is able to regulate and you're not feeling so anxious in your body. Um, I think also, if you're able to focus on reading your Bible, I think that's another great one. Is just, hey, let's go to a really good section, like in the New Testament, for example. That's, hey, I'm going to read this passage, see how it feels, maybe do some prayer, maybe put on some worship music or something like that, something to distract. Um, those are the things that I really like for anxiety. I've dealt with anxiety since I was uh, in high school. So my top two things are distraction, and grounding, in the sense of I'm going to go lay outside. I'm going to go touch some grass, right? I'm going to be in nature and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to like, okay, hey, I'm okay. I'm touching some grass. I'm feeling the sun on my skin. I'm doing all of these things. Or I text my husband and say, hey, send me a bunch of funny videos, or my mom, send me a whole bunch of funny videos so I can distract myself. So those are usually my like go-to suggestions for anxiety.
What about, let's see, so anger, anxiety, what about sadness? Like you're just
So,
super depressed feeling.
okay. And usually what we do when we're sad is we like to go and isolate, stay in bed, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think if you can do a hot shower, I think that's great, because again, physically releasing that with like the hot water and everything, it lets our muscles kind of get out of that tense state. I think again, dancing is a great one. Um, any kind of physical activity for sadness, or even just allowing yourself to cry. sometimes putting on, and I've done this before, like putting on a sad song to get yourself to cry is great, because you're just like, all right, I'm going to get in this and I'm going to cry it out. And then it releases that emotion for you and you feel much better. You're like, oh, okay, now what do I want to do? Right. And especially if we're kind of going into that depressive mind, we go into a more numb state when we're depressed. And so getting us to, hey, let's feel this emotion for a minute. It brings us back to, okay, hey, I'm feeling emotions. I'm not feeling numb. Okay, I got that out. I'm feeling a little bit better. I'm going to go make myself some food, or I'm going to go on a walk, right? Another thing is being expressive, like art therapy kind of thing, like drawing, painting, knitting, crocheting, any of those kind of things, or reaching out to a friend. A lot of the times I ask my clients on our first session, who is your support system? Who do you go to distract yourself? Who do you go to when you need a laugh? And kind of have those people in your back pocket for whenever those emotions show up.
Yeah, that's important. I think we're very isolated as a society right now, with the internet, with texting, with TikTok, with all of that stuff. And that's not how God wanted us to be. That's not how we're built. We're supposed to be communicative. That's how we get most fulfillment.
Yeah.
And we're missing that in our lives right now. So a lot of people are dealing with a lot of depression.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was like, yeah, I do think that, because it may seem like we're more connected with social media, but in all honesty, it makes us distance ourselves.
It does. And I think a lot of people have lost the ability to socialize and feel comfortable doing so, to where, since we see you through a screen, as soon as we see you in person, you're like anxious. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to act. You just want to get through it. You don't make eye contact with strangers as they're walking past. Like, you're isolating yourself, and it's very unhealthy.
Yeah.
So intimacy, I see you want to go through that portion. So why don't you take us through that?
Yes, I will do that. Do you have to step away just for 1 second, just because my son is crying? So I do apologize.
That's okay. That's okay.
Right.
Go for it. So we are real moms. Most of the people that are on here are parents. I'm a parent. This is just one of the things that we deal with. So I hope you guys can be patient with us. But I think that what we're going through in this conversation is very important. When we talk about community, let's talk about that for a second. I am really bad at making friends. I get very anxious. I get very awkward. I've been told I come off as very intimidating and too, what's the word, blunt. And it's nothing that I mean. I'm very sincere in when I have a relationship, but the initial act of trying to create that relationship can be quite difficult. So get yourself out there. If you don't have somebody to reach out to within your community, so if you are like myself, we are military, we just got to Hawaii. What I did, which was completely out of my comfort zone, my child had a birthday as soon as we moved here. So what I did is I had my kids take all of these invitations to the neighborhood. I didn't know anyone in the neighborhood, but I did know that a lot of them had children. So I had them take these to strangers, essentially, in the neighborhood. And some of them actually showed up for the birthday, and we hit it off. It was quite awkward starting out, but we hit it off, and now I actually have friends here. So it took a minute reaching out to them. How are you doing? But over time, you build that relationship and you feel less alone. You have that supportive community when you need it. So I am giving you a call to action. If you're one of those people that you really only have people that are long distance away that you can reach out to, try something different in your community. Get on Facebook, get on Facebook groups and say, hey, I really am lonely here. I would really like to make some friends. This is a little bit about me. I'd like to invite some of you that are interested to a brunch or something like that, and wait for people to respond. Get out of your comfort zone. Go to the brunch. See if you hit it off. If you don't, no harm, no foul. You're maybe taking an hour out of your day to be uncomfortable, but you may actually make some friends. So please get out of your comfort zone and build that community with yourself. So happy to see you back. Did you get that situated?
Yes, all good now.
Okay, cool. So let's get into intimacy. What do you want to tell us about that?
Yes. So, I know sometimes that can be like a touchy subject with, marriages and everything, especially like in the Christian culture. And so the thing is with intimacy, it's not just about like sexual acts. It's about, like I said earlier, touching of the shoulder, holding hands, hugging, kissing, all that kind of stuff. That is another big thing that usually shows up from a traumatic response. So, examples of this would be, um, a person who may have reservations of even wanting to hold hands, or, hey, let me, give you like a massage or something like that. Any kind of physical touch, they're kind of like, ooh, don't want that. And again, that can stem from previous traumatic relationships. And it could be also maybe platonic relationships. Maybe you don't like giving people hugs or something like that, right? And it could just be a personality trait, or hey, something happened that I don't like being touched at all. So it could be, like I said, because of a sexual trauma, or just maybe a self-esteem thing, like, hey, I'm not really in the right mindset to even accept physical touch. Secondly, if there's all of these other things that we talked about already, is like emotional regulation, bad communication, it's almost like you don't want to open yourself up to intimacy in a relationship. If you don't feel, secure, if you don't feel that you can communicate what you need or be heard, you're less likely to want to be in those intimate moments with your spouse. It's kind of a way to give up another part of ourselves. And if we're not able to connect with our partner in other ways, it definitely makes the other part strained, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is, it could be overly intimate because they're trying to prove something, right? So maybe in past relationships, they felt like they weren't enough, or, from even childhood trauma, like being told, hey, I'm not enough. So they kind of overcompensate for it. You're like, okay, I'm going to be extra lovey. I'm going to be extra like touchy and feely and everything. And that's another trauma response is, hey, I need you to want me. So I'm going to do those things too, overly, you know, and, so it really could just go both ways. You could have a really low libido with your partner, or it could be overly done, if that makes sense. And I think it's good to kind of like pinpoint those things, because that's your spouse, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the one person that you can have those intimate moments with. Like, that is what God graced us with. We are allowed to have those moments with our spouse and kind of love them in that way. And so when there's, that discrepancy between those two, it can get, a little messy, you know?
Yeah. So is this going to be another one of those step out of your comfort zone, realize, pinpoint where this is coming from, and
Mhm.
then challenge yourself a little bit by little?
Yeah. And I think, again, there are some like, exceptions, because like some people,
Right.
they're not overly, they don't have a high libido or anything like that. And some people that's just what they are. And that's fine. It's just kind of working with your partner and being like almost working with them so that they feel comfortable You never, obviously, never want to force anyone to do anything that they don't feel comfortable with or consent to. It's more of like, hey, you know what? I'm really attracted to my spouse. I want to have this relationship with them. I want to do or like love them in this way. It is something that we are allowed to do with our spouses in that partnership that God has granted us. So I want to enjoy it, right? And it's more of another way to connect with your spouse and create that comfort and almost helping with their self-esteem too, because they're like, oh, I am wanted. Hey, this is healthy. I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm allowed to want these things with my spouse, and it's a beautiful
Mhm.
thing. It really is.
Mhm.
And the fact that you like that's your person, I think is great. You get to have another deep level of connection with your spouse. Um, but again, trauma can kind of come in and mess all that up.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to do an episode that'll be more of an explicit episode meant for 18 and older on, because women are usually the ones with the low libido.
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, it happens to be opposite. My husband is the one with the low libido. And I've
Yeah.
already had an episode on what to do in that situation with a trauma therapist. I think I'd like to do an episode on what a man can do in that situation where his
Mm-hmm.
wife has the low libido, and talk about ways to touch her. And these
Mm-hmm.
aren't even touching the sexual organ. This is
Right.
literally other ways to touch her
Mm-hmm.
that will get her motor running,
Yes.
that it's not in their nature to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how, because that's not how they respond.
Yes.
So I think I'm going to do another episode based on that. But I think intimacy is so very important in any relationship. In a Christian relationship, we tend to say, "Oh, that's not something we should talk about." In
Mm-hmm.
reality, we should be talking about it. God
Yeah.
meant this to be a beautiful and connective thing for your spouse and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually really important to talk about, discuss, and be open to in your relationship. Is there anything else that you want to touch on that you think would be helpful for our viewers?
Um, I think I think we covered pretty big topics. It's yeah, we kind of went over like different trauma responses and how to kind of work through those things in our relationships. So I think we did pretty good on that.
Good. So just to recap, so you really need to think about, you need to be self-reflective,
Mm-hmm.
very much so, because it's not, I hate to say this, and some may not agree with me, but it isn't your spouse's responsibility to pinpoint these things for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's your responsibility to take responsibility of your actions, your responses, and your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you truly want to heal from this for yourself and for the lovingness in your relationship, then you need to be self aware, very, very self aware. So have those healthy arguments in front of the kids in a relationship. Let them see the resolution so you can teach them how to have healthy responses, and that there always needs to be a resolution. Know your attachment styles, know your spouse's attachment style. So that way you can have the goal of getting to a secure attachment style. Remember that yelling at your children can create new pathways in their brain from a trauma response as if it were a traumatic event. So be cognizant when you're speaking with your children. Don't be afraid to say you're sorry if you make a mistake with your spouse or your children. Um, so, outburst and emotional regulation issue, we talked on that. Make sure that if that's you or if that's your spouse, seek therapy if you can. Um, we don't want that to be the be end all of your relationship. You want to always try and gradually become better than you were yesterday. So seek out help. And then if your spouse is that person, help your spouse regulate that emotion, sit with them, ask what they need. Men shouldn't cry. That is something that we have been told as a society.
Mhm.
If you're a wife and your husband tends to not cry in ways that you can tell he's like, it's a trauma response from the way he was taught, allow him that safe space and tell him it's okay. Utilize their love language while attempting to deal with trauma response immersion for a few seconds here and there to minutes. She talked about emotional regulation in children, allowing kids to have those emotions and it be okay, but not allowing them to dictate their actions in regards to those emotions. So teaching them how to a healthy way of responding to the emotions. Then she talked about trauma is held in our hips and our traps. So maybe if you have some trauma, you could go and get specific, because there are specific massage therapists that deal in that area of trauma release therapy. And they'll focus in those areas. And it's a very therapeutic experience. And then we talked about the three main emotions people feel and how to release those emotions. So if you're feeling angry, physical activity, go on a run, go to the gym, get a punching bag. If you don't have any of those, punch a pillow. If you have anxiety, dance around with uplifting music, jump and shake it out. She talked about box breathing. That's breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, release for 4 seconds, and again, hold for 4 seconds. Get distractions, read your Bible, pray. I liked the grounding, go outside, feel the grass, feel the sun, get in nature. Have someone send you a lot of funny videos. That's a way of distraction. And then sadness, do hot showers, dance with uplifting music, putting on a sad song and allowing yourself to cry. If you feel yourself becoming numb, make sure that you do something to allow yourself to feel that emotion. Make yourself some food and go for a walk, being expressive like art therapy, and then having that supportive friend that you can go to. So I think what we've discussed is really, really helpful and very important topic, because there's trauma in every marriage. So I really appreciate you being here today. I think that this was an awesome episode. I'm hoping that it helps our viewers. If it resonates with you and you have any questions in regards to it, I'll have Kayla put certain links or maybe even an email whichever she prefers, so that way you can contact her directly. She does deal in Texas only, but I'm sure that she'd be willing to help you find resources or give a little advice to you if you're not in Texas. So that will be in the descriptions of the video and the audio of this particular episode. And then if you want to reach out to me, I'm more than willing to help you get resources or give you advice. You can reach out to me through boundbygracepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love for you to join our Facebook group. Just go to Facebook group and look up Bound by Grace Podcast, where we discuss a lot of different topics and we uplift one another. And then we have our page at Bound by Grace Podcast, and then our website at boundbygracepodcast.com. I thank you all for being a part of this and look forward to the next episode. Thank you again, Kayla, and you guys have a wonderful day.